right, hello and welcome back. We're getting fairly deep into the Value of Growth lecture series. Last video, I said there are only a couple more. Well, during the week, I came up with a couple of ideas for a few more videos. So it's there are more than I thought. All right. One of the feedbacks I get is how do you use this in practice? And so this is the first of two videos on how to use the tools. In this video, I'm going to run through 9 scenarios using what I call the Italian cookie analysis and show you what the Italian cookie charts look like and how you should interpret them. I'm going to go kind of slow through it because whenever I give this lecture to my students, they look at me bewildered. So I keep trying to figure out how to make this more clear. We'll give it a go. This is the latest rendition. Let's see if it works. All right. So I think that my co-author Paul Sonkin, we pitched the perfect investment together. I think he came up with the idea that this layering of valuation, which we've been doing throughout the lecture series, is reminiscent of an Italian cookie. I think he came up with the phrase. He is pretty convinced I came up with the phrase. Either way, we refer to this analysis as the Italian cookie. Kind of fun. Now, the difference is that we use blue and not yellow because guess what? Yellow doesn't look great on an Excel spreadsheet or in a graph. But I was thinking as I prepped this video that in fact we use an inverted Italian cookie, and then you'll see my attempt to make that second layer blue. All right, so that's where the name Italian cookie comes from. I'm going to walk through 9 scenarios using the Italian cookie structure. All right, so this is Apple's enterprise value. It's been a spectacular stock over the last 10 years. More choppy recently. That's not the point of this lecture. I've talked about Apple before. But if you take this enterprise value here, you can break it into these 3 components. Invested capital, which is always red in my model. The present value competitive advantage, which is always blue. And then the market implied value of NOPAT growth, which is always green. And that's where we get the analogy to the Italian cookie. All right, fine. All right, so here are the 9 scenarios I'm going to walk through. Call them company 1 through company 9. All right. Now, in every case that I'm going to talk about, all of the companies have a positive invested capital. So red's always going to be present. That red layer is always going to be there. And this is true for almost all companies. All right. Then I'm going to walk through essentially 3 different scenarios with a positive invested capital. So we're going to have a case where the present value of competitive advantage is positive. So you have a blue layer. We're then going to walk through 3 cases where you have no blue. There's no present value of competitive advantage. Your ROIC equals your cost of capital. In this first one, sorry, just to go back, ROIC is greater than your cost of capital. It's that excess returns that creates the blue layer. Then your ROIC equals your cost of capital. And then we'll go through 3 cases where your ROIC is less than your cost of capital. And you have negative blue. And it's these negative blue, negative green that people get confused. What does it mean? And that's what I want to walk through. Then we're going to walk through 3 cases of market implied value growth, green. So one case where you have positive investor expectations for growth, positive green. No green will be our second case. And the third case would be negative green. That's where I get lots of questions. Then we're going to do the same thing for the next set of companies. And you're going to see 0 green, negative green, and positive green. There's a reason why I inverted the order. And then finally, we're going to look at a set of companies that have negative blue, but positive green, a different case, and then 0. All right, so that's the setup. Let's walk through it. All right, so this is the way we want to think about it. There'll be 2 charts for every company. One will be earnings power value, one will be enterprise value. Earnings power value is essentially management performance, whereas green is investor expectation. It's something I keep wanting to emphasize. So earnings power value is really driven by management. Green is driven by investors. So on the left is your earnings power value, and then its 2 components, which are invested capital and the present value of competitive advantage, excess returns. On the right, I then take the enterprise value and I add on green. That's where you get green, and that gets me to, I'm sorry, I take the earnings power value on the left, I add green, the green market implied value growth to it, and that's how you get the enterprise value. So on the left side of this chart, this table is the various components, the model. Now what you see is positive invested capital, positive present value competitive advantage, and then positive market implied value growth. All right, and so these map. So there's your earnings power value, kind of a dark gray, that maps over, and there's your enterprise value, black, that maps over, and then you can see that your invested capital maps over each of those two charts on the right, and then your present value competitive advantage, market implied value growth only shows up as a component of your enterprise value. All right, so the table on the left drives the chart on the right. You can see where the numbers come from. Okay, great. All right, and this has been our classic model throughout the lecture series is positive red, which is almost always the case. Most companies have a positive invested capital. Almost all the companies we looked at, examples we looked at in this lecture series, had a positive blue, meaning they had a return on capital greater than their cost of capital, and then they all had positive green, which meant that there were investor expectations for future growth. All right, that's the case. All right, so the key here, and the insight I'm trying to drive throughout the lecture series, is this is what you're paying for. The red and the blue, which add up to earnings power value, is management's execution, business model, and things like that. And then green is investors' expectation for future growth. But that's what you're paying for today. So the question, of course, is how do you make money in this stock? How do you make money in this stock? How does the enterprise value go up? That's the key. And the key here is you just grow NOPAT faster than investor expectations. So management, the company grows faster. So on a chart like this, where you have positive red most of the time, positive blue, excess returns, and you have green, growth expectations, you make money in this stock when the company grows faster than investor expectations. That's it. Now, you also have to assume that the return on capital holds and some things like that. But how do you make money? Growth, 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 growth. Okay. Company two that I want to look at is we have the enterprise earnings power value on the left. We have a positive red. That's going to be the case throughout all 9 scenarios. Positive greens, we have excess returns. But what's interesting is if I look in the chart on the right, enterprise value, there's no market implied value of growth, right? No NOPAT growth is priced in. Investors don't believe this will grow, but they do believe that the blue will hold. So the excess returns will hold. So they're betting on a long duration competitive advantage, but no growth. All right, that's what you're paying for, no growth. So how do you make money in the stock? Pretty easy. The company maintains its competitive advantage, blue holds, and they grow NOPAT. So how do you make money on this? You paid nothing for growth, so any growth will deliver excess returns. In company one, you had growth expectations built in, so the company had to grow faster than those expectations. In company two, they just have to grow, hold their return on capital, hold their competitive advantage, and then grow NOPAT, you make money. All right, company three, this is the one that this example is always one I get a lot of questions. All right, let me walk you through it again. On the left is your earnings power value, positive red, always going to be the case. Excess returns signified by the blue, positive blue. And then on the right, you have negative green. So now I want you to focus on enterprise value versus earnings power value. That's the key. The market doesn't believe the competitive advantages will hold. That's what a negative green means. Because remember, it's negative green is growth expectations for NOPAT, not revenue, for NOPAT. And so in this example, because the enterprise value trades at the invested capital, investors are betting that those excess returns will go away. Right? So you have negative NOPAT growth priced in. It's the erosion of the company's competitive advantage. That's the key. All right, that's what you're paying for. So how do you make money in the stock? Simple. The company maintains its competitive advantage. Doesn't have to grow. Just hold that competitive advantage. And guess what? Blue holds, and over time, black will move towards the sum of red and blue. So that's how you make money. All right, company four. Pretty easy in this one. You've got enterprise value, earnings power value on the left. It trades at invested capital. There's no excess returns. What you see in the table, there's no excess returns. The return on capital is equal to its cost of capital. And on the right, the enterprise value also equals the invested capital, which is the key. That's what you're paying for. I'm going to keep coming back to that. So how do you make money in the stock? Well, you expand the ROIC to be greater than the cost of capital. So the company's business gets better. They get more efficient. They get more profitable. They reduce the amount of invested capital in the business. You expand that ROIC, the stock will go up. All right. So if a stock trades earnings per value and enterprise value equal to its invested capital, guess what? The way you make money is just make it a better business, which makes sense. All right, company 5. Now we're back to a negative green. This is similar to company 4 in that the earnings per value trades at invested capital, trades at its economic book value, but the enterprise value is less than the invested capital, trades below book value, right? We see this is sort of classic value investing, at least back in the time of Graham, as you bought something that was less than its invested capital. Effectively, the way the math works is you have negative green, which means you have negative NOPAT growth priced in. This is what you're paying for right there. And so question, how do you make money in the stock, is that the bet here is that the business is going to get worse. That's what's priced in. The business is going to get worse, such that the cash flows, NOPAT, when we capitalize them, they are worth less than the invested capital. So either this is a self-liquidating business or an activist is going to come along. But how do you make money in the stock? It's pretty simple, is NOPAT does not decline. What's priced in is a decline in NOPAT, an erosion in the business. How do you make money? Management does a better job than investors think, and that value holds, that NOPAT holds. And guess what? It will always be worth its invested capital, as long as it's not, kind of liquidating, going out of business. All right, company 6. This is interesting. So earnings per value. This is a case where there's no current excess returns. There's no present value of competitive advantage. There's no blue. All right, so earnings per value trades at its invested capital, no excess return, but the enterprise value has green. Remember, green is investors' expectations for NOPAT growth. So what's priced in, it's modeled as really that green is a forecasted blue. This is not, this is the subtlety. It's not that investors believe that this will grow necessarily. What they believe is what's priced in is that the return on invested capital will expand and blue will materialize. That is the bet. So it's competitive advantage is priced in, although none exist today. That's what you're paying for. How do you make money in the stock? This is a tricky one because what's priced in is an expansion in the return on invested capital. That's the key. So how do you make money in the stock? They have to expand, the company has to expand its ROIC more than and grow NOPAT faster than investor expectations. So what's priced in is the business is going to get better. That's what you're paying for. How do you make money? The business gets better, but it gets better than investors think. So the blue shows up, and probably you need some growth on top of that. Now, probably hard to develop blue without growth, but you need to make money. You need the company to expand its return on invested capital and probably grow its NOPAT. All right, company 7, also sort of a tricky one, and this is why I'm doing this. It's really these last couple of cases. All right, let's walk through this. Earnings per value on the left trades below invested capital, which means that you have a negative blue. What does that mean? The company's cost of capital is the company's return on capital is less than its cost of capital. That's how you're ending up with a negative blue. So earnings per value is its cash flow value. That's the value of the cash flows. Invested capital is the value of the assets. Well, in this case, the value of the cash flows on a steady state base are not worth as much. The cash flows themselves, capitalized, are not worth as much as the invested capital. I think that's really interesting. And then if you look to the right, you do get positive green. So people will come to me and say, I have negative blue, I have positive green. What's that mean? Well, effectively, what's priced in is that you will end up with the return on capital will get to the cost of capital. And therefore, the negative blue goes away, right? The return on capital goes to the cost of capital. The negative blue goes away. That's what effectively green is in this case. It's equal to the negative blue. And so what's priced in is that the return on capital will go back to the cost of capital, which, by the way, is should happen. Unless the company really is failing, that should happen. It will a return to that. By the way, I think this is the argument that when you look at price to book, what you're really looking at is price to cash flow effectively. And you're comparing that cash flow against book value. And I think if you're buying things at less than book, this is really the story you're telling. All right, so what's priced in is that reversion to the return on capital will equal its cost of capital. And the negative blue goes away. That's what the green represents, negative blue going away. How do you make money in the stock? Basically, the company expands the ROIC more than and grows NOPAT faster than investor expectations, similar to the case before. All right, company 8, another complicated one. In this case, what's the same is, right, they have a negative excess spread. Return on capital is less than the cost of capital. That's why your earnings power value is less than red. Key here, which I think is pretty interesting, is that the cash flow value, that earnings power value, is less than the value of those cash flows capitalized is less than the invested capital, right? The company's earning excess returns. Now on the right, what you'll see, this is similar to company 7. And that is you have positive green, but you have more green positive than you do negative blue. Whereas before, we can go back for a second, what you had was the positive green and the negative blue were identical, same amount, which basically said this case in company 7, you're betting, the market's betting, the company's return on capital will go back to its cost of capital. In this case, they're actually betting that the cost of capital the return on capital will exceed the cost of capital. And you'll end up with either bigger blue, all the negative blue goes away, but you'll end up with bigger blue, or you'll start to grow. So that's what you're paying for. Remember, that's what you're paying for. How do you make money in the stock? The key is the company expands its ROIC more than, and it grows NOPAT faster than investors' relatively high expectations. This is a case where investor expectations are pretty high because not only do you have the return on capital going back to the cost of capital, that's kind of reasonable in a lot of cases, but you actually have what's priced in is that investors believe that return on capital will go to the point where it's in excess of the cost of capital. That's what's priced in. How do you make money? They have to do better than that. They have to beat investor expectations. All right, company 9, similar to what we've seen so far, you have earnings power value is less than your invested capital. Once again, the value of the cash flow steady state as is worth less than the invested capital, the capital invested in the business. That is represented by a negative competitive advantage, a return on capital less than the cost of capital. Now on the right, you have your enterprise value is the same. So the investors do not believe this company can recover. They believe it's going to continue that way. So what you're paying for is effectively, let me go back one, what you're paying for is a steady state, no improvement in the return on capital, and certainly no growth, right? Absolutely. How do you make money in the stock is they grow NOPAT to equal the capital charge, right? Expand their ROIC to equal the cost of capital. That's all you make. The business just has to recover. You'll make money in that case. All right. Oh, that's the end of the slideshow. All right. I'm hoping this is helpful, these 9 cases. You may have to go back through it again and make some notes. But it's a way, once you've done the Italian cookie for your company, you've calculated the invested capital, you've calculated the present value competitive advantage, if it exists, and you've calculated the market implied value of growth. These charts will help you interpret what that Italian cookie looks like. All right. Thank you very much.